First story. My abusive mom kicked me out of the house at 16, which forced me to be sold by a guy to keep myself afloat. Now she's come back, suing me to see my children, thinking she will have them like she had me, not realizing I'm now working in the legal field. So I took my revenge, publicly humiliated her, and went NC. I am a 41-year-old, happily married father of 5 children. My wife and I have been married for 20 years, and both of us came from fractured, chaotic families. My wife's parents divorced, and were both alcoholics. Her father died of liver failure, and her mother has cooled off a bit and retired. My parents went through a vicious, violent divorce when I was a child. My father moved 10 states away to get away from the craziness, and my mother has never changed. Because of our experiences with violent and unstable families, my wife and I have worked extremely hard to be picture-perfect parents and spouses. We've done everything you can think of to have a perfect life for our kids. My wife is a sports coach, and I'm a scout master with the BSA. Our kids are healthy, engaged, and have everything they need physically and emotionally. This has been in spite of our families, not because of them. My mother is a terrible woman. She systematically abused me throughout my whole childhood, and continued to be a violent, bitter, mean and aggressive person to me throughout my whole life. I could sit here for hours and write about the things that she's done. She used the courts to destroy the life of my father for decades. Once he was out of the house, she turned her anger on me with physical and emotional violence. When I was 16, she expelled me from the house and left me homeless. I had to go from house to house, figure out where to live, and try to graduate high school. I ended up living with an older boy that was about 4 years older than me, and I had to engage in a sexual relationship with him in order to secure that housing. I was not gay. I did not want to be gay, and I had to endure something that destroyed me in order to not be sleeping on the street. When I turned 18, I was able to start working at a better job, get out of that bad situation, and start my life from scratch. My wife and I have scratched and clawed our way into a stable, middle-class lifestyle. We both went to college at night for years and years, and we have good jobs in a house in the suburbs. Out of a sense of duty to our family, I sought to include my extended family in our lives, and permitted a relationship with strict boundaries between my mother and my children. For the most part, she has been fairly stable for about 20 years. I say stable in that we could have routine contact about once per month for that time period, with a minimum of disruptive behavior. She has never acknowledged her abuse of me, as she is an extremely selfish person. Everything about our past has been left unsaid. My mother, over the last 2 years, has become completely unraveled. Her second husband decided to leave her for his own health and sanity, and she has instantly reverted back to the most cruel and bizarre behavior imaginable. All aspects of her life have been affected. She is calling the cops, suing him in family court, alienating large parts of her family from one another, all while trying to tell my children about why their grandfather is a bastard and how she feels about him. Once I saw this happening, I said, "That's it, not again," and took some action. At the beginning of this year, I wrote a very courteous note to my mother, asking her to reevaluate the way she's been behaving toward me and my family. When I tell you it was neutral and courteous, I really mean it. I checked it like 5 times. She responded by calling me terrible names and ungrateful piece of shit, for example, and screaming bloody murder on the phone at me. I blocked her from my phone. And then she did the same thing to my wife. So I informed my mother by email that I'd like to maintain distance until she works on herself in therapy, or with her divorce mediator. Things lay still for about 6 months. This morning I woke up to a series of bizarre emails from my mother asserting that she wants to see my children for their birthday, which is coming soon, and that she is giving me 24 hours to provide acceptable dates for permitting visitation, or to be prepared for a legal summons to family court. I'm like, "Weef? This woman is the equivalent of schoolyard bully, following me around in life and tormenting me non-stop until you just want to cry." The worst part about a bully is that when you ask them to lay off you for even 5 minutes, they just take this as a cue to keep it up even more. I took one look at this, and I was like, holy shit, this woman is clearly out of her effing mind. Now I know that in the post title, I said she's suing me. I work in the legal field, and I know that until I've been summoned to appear, not been sued. So, no, she's only threatening to sue me right now. Sorry for the hyperbole. But I'm finding myself in the same bizarre, out-of-touch reality that everyone in this person's life finds themselves in. This batched insane woman forced me to see my own father at a McDonald's when we were kids for 2 hours every 2 weeks as per the court order while she waited outside in a running car. I was only allowed to see him in this fashion, because she hated him, and didn't care what this would do to her own kids. There were more than a few times when the clock would strike 8, and she would come screaming into the McDonald's, threatening to call the cops and have my dad arrested for kidnapping, while grabbing us by the arms and pulling us out of the store. This is what she's capable of doing with family court. I had a literal hyperventilating panic attack on the floor of my office this morning. I have sought to be respectful, mature and use good decision-making skills this whole time. My wife and I have an extremely secure marriage, and she is in agreement with me 100% through all of this. I'm finding myself wishing that my mother would just die and please leave me alone. She's like this inescapable bully who will never, under any circumstance, Leave a person alone until she's proven that she can hurt them. I don't even care what she's experienced in her life. I just need to be away from her. So that's my true off my chest story. I've been living with this shame, fear, and lingering self-hatred for 30+ years. All while trying to be a super dad and a great career man. I called a local family law practice today to get a referral. I'm going to ask them to send a demand letter to her to try and get her to back the hell off. But look at what this has come to. I have to shell money out of my own pocket to protect myself and my kids from my insane mother. I feel like Rodney Dangerfield sometimes. Ironically, the money I'm going to have to send to the lawyer for their retainer is money that I had earmarked for the kids to go to summer camp. So figure that one out. Thank you for letting me tell you my story. Just typing it out helps. Relevant comments OP on. If there is legal precedent that gives her threats in his area, OP New York does provide an avenue for grandparents to sue for custody. Although it would turn into a protracted legal fight, that would cost me a lot of money and aggravation if she did. In general, the process is the punishment. I had to deal with family court, seeps, cops, etc. when I was 10 and my parents were getting divorced. If you wanted to see me literally pass out on the floor, you'd drag me back to family court. OP on his mother, having the financial means to sue for grandparents' rights. OP. I've seen this woman use the courts to destroy my father for over 10 years. The answer is, who knows? I guess I'll just have to wait for a court summons to see what she will do. Chocolate Candy Bar OP, I'm extremely sad to read it. I suppose you know that, should she sue you, this would more likely result in her 40-year-old horrors being exposed in court, and her being denied the right to stay on the same planet as your kids. So, I suppose that you're here to just get it off. And yes, you don't deserve it, and definitively yes, you are paying for having been a good person. May life repay you and your mom. All my vibes are for you. Update: I posted this all on Thursday, when I was experiencing a serious amount of turmoil. Since then I've calmed down a lot, and also had the good judgment to talk this over with the important people in my life. First things first, I'd like to thank everyone for the words of encouragement and support that were given. There were some surprising insights from many of the posters, and I found myself agreeing with and appreciating many of the stories of support that were posted by others. I now understand that I am not the only person with a domineering, selfish, easily enraged parent. To all the people who blamed me for being a victim of my mother, and somehow being at fault for all this, well, I want to use some strong language to you, but I'll just ask you to please think about how fortunate your life has been that you haven't experienced what I have experienced. So on to the update. As it turns out, only 2 states in the union have codified grandparents' rights: California and New York, and I do live in New York basically. In New York, a grandparent does not have the automatic right to have access to grandchildren, but a grandparent does have automatic standing to file a petition to be heard in family court. The petition can be squashed, but they can file the petition. I do want to get back to this later. I had a conference with a family law attorney on Friday, and he helped me understand the situation and craft a strategy. He was generous enough to not require a retainer, unless and until I'm served with legal papers. He basically explained that the grandparent does have standing to file a petition based on a pre-existing relationship with the grandchildren, but that she would most likely not be able to overcome the desires of 2 married parents, who were both exercising their judgment for the health and safety of their children. He explained that in New York, our simple desire to terminate a relationship would most likely be overcome in court. However, if we introduce some of the specific actions that she's exhibited over the last few years: familial alienation, adult humor near children, uncontrollable anger, hoarding of house cats, dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, we would very likely prevail in a court setting. He explained that the good thing is that we had already restricted contact between our children and my mother to about once per month, and that in his experience, he had never seen a court order for grandparent visitation for more than once a month, for 1 hour per session. I tried to be reasonable, so I said, okay, the worst case scenario is supervised status quo. I did broach the topic of a restraining order, and I was quickly schooled on how that works. Despite the Reddit attorneys who all assured me that I could automatically get a restraining order, well, I hate to say that you're all completely wrong. An order of protection has to be accompanied by some facilitating act of domestic violence. Because I've only been harassed and alarmed by words, I can't be granted a restraining order. However, if my mother causes some disorderly act, such as coming to my house and causing a ruckus, that could trigger an order, if and only if I document it by having the police come and detail a report. So, keep that in mind next time you recommend a restraining order. They're not easy to get. The attorney recommended that I send a private cease and desist to my mother via certified mail and email. I decided to write a 2-page, brutal takedown of this woman in order to blow off some steam and document my concerns and try to get ahead of her legal maneuvering. I decided to take a 2-pronged approach. First, I sent this cease and desist to her on Friday at lunchtime via email, and also certified mail. Then, I took a page out of her playbook and publicly scorched the earth to apply social pressure to her. I emailed and texted every single member of my extended family, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, my stepfather, and my father, and spoke to several of them to tell them exactly what was happening. Whether they wanted to hear it or not, I sent them intimate details of my mother's abuse, and my decision to cut her off for the welfare of myself and my family. My reasoning there is simple. My mother's abuse thrives behind closed doors and embarrassed silence. For 30 years I've had to hear, "Oh, that's just the way your mother is," while people just stood by and let her act in the most insane and violent ways you can imagine. My mother got angry at my stepfather last year and tried to run him over with her car. Then crashed her car into the front door of his business, screaming at him and ranting and raving in public. Do you know what people did? They surely called the police or an ambulance and had her monitored for her safety. Right? No, my sister quickly threw her into her car and drove her away so that she wouldn't be arrested. My stepfather was so embarrassed that he took the crashed car, drove it to a parking spot, and then paid out of pocket for the damage to the front of his business. This is what happens in families that are dealing with a crazy person. They cover it up, hoping that it will someday get better. Well, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. I sought to publicly embarrass and pressure her for a change. Anyway, by Friday afternoon my mother got the message and sent me emails telling me that I could stop attacking her and maligning her to my family. She indicated that she would abandon any legal efforts to seek visitation with my children. This was a relief. But to be fair, I was almost looking forward to having a public forum to describe her antics in court. Nevertheless, it seems like she's backing off for the moment. The fallout and damage to my extended family are most likely severe and permanent. However, my wife and I discussed this fully and have decided that this is the direction we're going in. We'll just have to have holidays by ourselves if the family can't be loyal and supportive of me. On to the last point, and I really want to drive this home. In 1991, my mother conducted an incredibly vicious divorce against my father. I mean, she literally sought to destroy him. And she did. He was completely beaten by her. One of the things that my father told me about just this weekend was that, at the time, my grandparents on his side sought to have guaranteed visitation with us after the divorce. My mother actually went to court on that specific topic and specifically litigated that she was the custodial mother and had sole decision-making about who the children would be around. The court ruled at the time that, in fact, there was no right for a grandparent to see children, and my mother was successfully able to keep me away from my very loving and happy grandparents for years. I was only able to see them during court-mandated visitation with my own father. The law in New York changed in 2000 so that grandparents' rights came into effect. It was too late to help me, unfortunately. I want to really drive this home. The effing balls on this woman to go to court on her own behalf and state in a court of law that she, as the custodial mother of children, has the sole and ultimate decision on who her children have relationships with, and then to 35 years later attempt to use the changes in law to assert that she has grandparents' rights to visitation despite the wishes of both parents was too much for me to bear. That alone made me say, no way, not happening under my watch. So that's the update. Long-winded, yes, but it makes me feel good to type this out. I'm finally able to unburden the unbearable shame and embarrassment of what happened to me to members of my family. And I won't allow myself to be ignored anymore. I'm 41. And my selfish, insane baby boomer arsehole mother is in her mid-70s and has no power over me anymore. I'm sick and tired of bottling this up. Anyone who doesn't like it, they can go suck an egg. I deserve to have loyal and faithful people in my life. Relevant comments. Ashley is in her case now public record. If she believes that only custodial parents should dictate a child's relationship with extended family, isn't that something a lawyer can look up and use? OP. I have started the FOIL request at the family court, where the divorce was adjudicated. However, this will likely take months and months to get the records. I may read them just to more fully understand my family's history. To Tuva. The audacity of this speech. OP. You got sound advice from your lawyer, and you outed her family. Good job. Practical Chess 2313. Man, I am so unbelievably glad that you stood up for yourself, and that you and your wife are united in standing up to your extended family. That's not easy to do. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. But abusers are so good at making you believe that you're the one exception. Second story. My entitled sister is mad that her fiancé has passed her loyalty test, rejecting her friend she sent to flirt, but not forcefully enough. So I exposed her to her fiancé and he called off the wedding. Now my sister says I ruined her life, and she went no contact. Dad took her side, blaming me. I'm using an alt because my friends use Reddit, and I'm not sure if I want to open this stuff up to those in my life, as things haven't settled between everyone yet. I 26F have a younger sister, Lily 24F, who's been with her fiancé Mark 28M, for 3 years. They've always seemed really happy together, and they're planning to get married next summer. Lily and I have always been close, but she can get pretty intense and a bit paranoid when it comes to relationships. A few weeks ago, Lily told me about this plan she had. She wanted to test Mark's loyalty by having her friend Sarah flirt with him at a party to see how he'd react. I told her it was a terrible idea, and that she should just trust him, but she was dead set on it. She said she needed to be sure Mark wouldn't cheat on her once they were married. So, last weekend at a party, Sarah went ahead with a plan. According to Lily, Mark was nice, but didn't flirt back, and even mentioned he was engaged. But Lily was still upset, because she felt he didn't shut Sarah down forcefully enough. I thought this whole thing was really unfair to Mark. He had no idea he was being tested. I felt bad for him. So, I ended up telling him what Lily did. He was shocked and hurt. but thanked me for being honest with him. Now, Lily is absolutely furious with me. She says I betrayed her and ruined their relationship. She won't talk to me, and she's saying I overstepped big time. Our parents are split on this. Mom thinks I did the right thing, but Dad thinks I should have stayed out of it. Mark is now reconsidering the engagement, and Lily has cut me off completely. I'm feeling really torn and guilty. I don't know if I did the right thing by telling Mark, or if I should have just stayed out of it. And if I am, how do I fix this? Should I try to repair my relationship with Lily? Should I reach out to Mark again or give him space? Any advice would be really appreciated. I'm so lost right now. Comments: angry middle-aged your sister isn't mature enough for marriage, and is looking for reasons to cause drama. Either she's bored, or she cheated or came close to cheating and is projecting her guilt onto the man. Your dad is also an idiot. Think about it like this. She gave him a test. He passed with flying colors, and she's still mad he didn't do well enough somehow. He passed a test she created and roped her equally terrible friend into, and she's mad at the result even though it's the one she said she wanted. Your sister needs help, not a husband. Little bit funny. 21. This honestly, her fiancé couldn't win. If he had been too rude, she probably would have been pissed off. Daughter of dusk, nah. And I don't blame Mark. I wouldn't want to marry someone who doesn't trust me either. Gratchesty. Furthermore, she was dissatisfied that her game didn't end up showing that her fiancé is a player. She wanted to go farther. She wants to trick him to catch him. Why is she so obsessed with proving he is a cheater? Who would want to associate with someone so invested in trying to track them or pushing someone else to harass them as a must to estimate their engagement or fidelity? Judgment Day update 5 days later. Hey everyone, I wanted to update you since it's been a month since everything went down. First off, thanks to everyone who shared their thoughts and advice. It helped a lot to hear different perspectives, and most people seem to agree that I did the morally right thing, which lifted a huge weight off my chest. After my post, things were really tense. Lily refused to talk to me, and there was a huge divide in our family since we're the only 2 kids my parents have now. Mark reached out once to say thanks, but I could tell he needed space, so I gave it to him. My attempts to be a source of comfort for him after everything went down didn't seem right, and I didn't want any worse assumptions to start. About 2 weeks in, Lily reached out and asked to meet up. I was surprised, but eventually we met up, and while she was still upset, and despite how pissed off she was at the beginning, she realized her actions were over the top. She told me she's going to see a therapist to work on her insecurities. It was an emotional talk, and we both cried. We agreed to try to slowly mend things, starting with meeting up at our parents' house more often. But it's going to take time. Mark took a break from Lily to process everything. They put their wedding plans on hold, which was hard for both of them. About a week ago, he decided he wanted to try and work things out, agreeing to attend couples therapy with her too. It's not easy, but they're committed to trying, and I guess I was so guilty at the start because it was obvious that, despite everything, he was crazy in love with her, and I didn't want to break that. During this time I've been working on myself too. I've realized how much I value honesty and integrity in relationships, and I'm trying to be more supportive without overstepping. It's a learning process, but I'm trying. Lily and I aren't back to where we were, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but we can keep trying. We've had a few good talks and laughed a little like we used to. Thanks again to everyone who offered advice and support. It's been a tough month, but I'm happier now. I'll keep you posted if anything major changes. Take care, and thanks again. Comments: background system 726. Glad to hear everyone is communicating like adults and trying to repair relationships. Rogue Squirrel: hot communication winning the day. That's something you don't see every day. Good one to everybody in this story. Apologies if the post comes off curt. Seeing my fair share of these stories tends to leave me jaded and cynical, but I do know the kudos are very real, and I hope things work out for everybody. Third story: the paternity test revealed I'm not the father, so I divorced my wife. But I couldn't bring myself to disown or give up my daughter, as I was bonded with her. I raised her as one of mine, thinking my family was supportive, until my father excluded just her from his will. She is not the family. When my M45 daughter F13 was born, I immediately felt that something was obviously amiss. She was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, which was extremely unlikely for a child of myself and my ex-wife F39. I am very Mediterranean, and I have olive skin, dark eyes and dark hair. My ex-wife has brown eyes and relatively dark brown hair. Her skin is barely lighter than mine. The baby also clearly bore no resemblance to me, or anyone in my family at all. I had been having misgivings about my ex too, and she seemed too quick to express surprise and make excuses. Still, I didn't want to throw away my marriage over what could have been my own misunderstanding of genetics, and so I signed the birth certificate. I instantly knew that I was going to have a paternity test done, but something else surprised me. When I brought our little girl home, I still fell in love with her. It felt just like bringing my son M14 home, and looking at her, I still just saw her as an innocent, beautiful little baby. We bonded. The paternity test came back negative, as I suspected it would, and I decided that our marriage was over. I still loved our little girl though. My then wife did everything that she could to drag out the divorce and refused to separate or move out. My daughter's biological father, Every bit as blonde and blue-eyed as I suspected, turned out to want nothing to do with her or my ex. He was already married with his own family, and his only focus was preventing the situation from blowing back on himself too much. My ex went totally nuts when both I and her affair partner rejected her, and she made some very unfortunate decisions. To make a long story short, she ended up with prison time for crimes including identity theft, assault with a deadly weapon, and grand theft auto. When she stole credit cards and forged documents for both of us, and when she stole her affair partner's car and tried to run him over with it. I ended up with custody of our kids, with the affair partner never even attempting to establish any kind of paternity rights. I didn't want to press the issue myself, as I couldn't deny that I had bonded with this child, even knowing that she wasn't my real daughter. I had been shunning my ex-wife as best I could and trying to move on with life after she was finally out of the house. It wasn't long before I got together with and married my current wife F34, and we've since had another 2 children. M10 F8. My eldest daughter is a total daddy's girl, and we have a wonderful relationship. She always feels loved, and I treat her the same as my other kids. Even though she obviously stands out, my family accepts her too, or at least that's what I thought. I work for my father's company, and the other day we were out talking about the future and his will, and he was talking about what money, assets, etc. He wanted to leave someone, including his grandchildren, and I noticed that my older daughter had been left out. I mentioned it to him, and he said, "It's nice what you've done for daughter's name, but you have real children, and obviously they should come first." I interrupted him, and I told him that she is my real daughter, and that I thought she should be treated equally. He just paused and looked at me for a moment, and he said, "I guess you feel how you feel." Before he noticed, I was still about to argue with him, and he shrugged and moved the conversation onto things about work and my siblings. I was too polite to try to force the matter at the time, but it sort of stuck with me. My father isn't the type of man to harp on a point, and I am certain that he's content to have said his piece, and would let the matter drop. He could certainly tell that what he said upset me, and so I doubt he'd bring it up again. Frankly, he sort of raised me the same way. At the time I was shocked because he'd always seemed to accept my daughter as a part of the family. He buys her gifts for her birthday, and for Christmas, and he makes her feel welcome. But thinking about it, he really is just a kind, polite, and generous man in a lot of ways. He will and has bought Christmas gifts for high school friends, or significant others, if he knew they were coming. And the same for other gift-giving occasions. He's generally very hospitable to anyone his friends or family bring around. So I thought that maybe it was just that, and I misinterpreted. My wife is Asian, and so my eldest daughter always stands out. She's thin, blonde, and blue-eyed, unlike pretty much anyone else in my family. And she's taller than any of the other girls, or even most of the women, really, so I'm aware that she might look like the neighbor kid visiting or something. My wife loves her, and I know that she 100% accepts her as one of our kids, and she has been a great mom and stepmom. I talk to my own mother though, and while she's definitely closer to my daughter than my father, they interact a lot more. And she includes my daughter with the other kids and other girls in family traditions and activities. I got a little bit of the same vibe from her. She was much more diplomatic. But it seems like she may also sort of consider my daughter to be sort of a guest or unfortunate orphan. I'm hosting or something like that. She pointed out that I can make my own will however I want. My daughter knows that she isn't biologically mine. That would have been hard to hide, even if we'd really had the opportunity. She doesn't want anything to do with either of her biological parents though. She's seen her bio dad perhaps a handful of times in her entire life, and I don't even think he can remember her middle name. He seems to have pretty successfully kept his family together and his wife from leaving him, but he definitely doesn't want any involvement. My ex-wife continued to spiral for a long while, and she lives in another state with another man, and her own new family at this point. She mercifully rarely makes contact. I've never really tried to go after either of them for money. I don't need it. And it's not a pot I want to stir. My siblings are mostly supportive, if a little bit mixed on the issue. Some of them say that they could never raise the child of a partner's affair, but all of them say that they love and accept their niece. I just can't get over the way that I feel distant and upset about what my father said. He's an extremely kind and generous man, and he's always taken care of his family. He's given me opportunities and a lifestyle that I never could have achieved without him. I love him, and I look up to him. Maybe that's why I feel sort of, I don't know, betrayed. It feels wrong that she's the only one of his grandchildren to be left out of his will, apparently because he doesn't consider her a real grandchild. Intellectually I can accept that he's technically correct, but it feels wrong. She is my daughter. Am I wrong though? Am I just being entitled and unreasonable here? Am I the Ursule? Comments Jacobitov. I get why members of your family might consider you foolish for raising the result of your ex-wife's affair, but honestly, it speaks well of your character that you treat her as your own. I wonder if your parents would be similarly non-accepting if you had adopted a child, because practically that is what happened. I wish you and your family the best. Duh. Lawfox 32. I think the OP should ask his parents that. If I had adopted a child, would you feel this way about that child? Okay. Because that's what I did. I put my name on her birth certificate and raised her, knowing she wasn't biologically mine. I adopted her, and she's my daughter. Live Western 1E 389. I agree. And TBH, she was born into your family, and you have claimed her as your own child, as if you'd adopted her or brought her into the world through birth. That's very important to me. And TBH, anybody who didn't want to accept that, and wanted to treat that child differently from my other kids, would not be someone I would want spending much time with any of my kids. Maita. I think you are an amazing dad. Judgment. Ta. Update. 5 days later. Just a small update. Thanks for the comments and wishes. It really put a lot of things into perspective, and it confirmed to me that I needed to say something. Some people seem surprised at the way I let my daughter's biological parents off the hook, so to speak. The main reason I've never tried to go after my ex or her affair partner for child support is that my daughter is more important than money. I'm not struggling at all, and I have the support I need. More importantly, though, I have my daughter, even though the affair partner didn't apparently want anything to do with her. My lawyer did mention way back in the day that either he or my wife, being her biological parents, could have a strong case for seeking custody. I know I'm biased, but her bio dad seems like a huge arsehole, and I know he doesn't care about her. I wouldn't put it past him to try to get custody, just to duck out of paying child support though, if his hand was forced. And the idea of her having to go stay with him is just something I don't even want to think about. Kind of the same thing happened when her mom got out of prison. She seemed like she was very quick to go shack up with her new guy, and she seemed willing to let the matter lie. So I did the same. The fact that neither of them tried to get her, or, in my ex's case, the way she hasn't even bothered to keep much contact with our son, tells me more than everything I need to know about the kind of parents they are, or would be. They only seem interested in their pre-existing or new families, respectively. I wouldn't want to try to back them into trying to take custody. With my daughter being 13, it's possible that we've sort of run out the clock on that matter. But it's still not drama we need or a risk worth taking. In better and more important news though, I talked with my dad. I met with my father for lunch, which was easy enough, as he's around most days, and we could sync up some time. I mentioned that I wanted to talk about my daughter not being in his will, and I told him that even if it meant dividing what was being left to me, or my other kids, I felt it was really important for her to be included. I also mentioned, as I felt, and as a lot of people pointed out, that it would be devastating for her to find out that she'd been excluded after his death. My father agreed that that was a really good point, and he said that she is a lovely girl, that he does love her, and that he wouldn't want to add extra pain or bitterness to her life, especially at such a time. Also, it had gotten around to him that I'd been sort of pulling my siblings a little bit, and I think my mom talked to him some, and he said, "This is obviously very important to you. You're my son. I can just change it. It's not so much money anyway." And he was right. The amounts of money being left to individual grandchildren aren't massive, but the gesture and the thought are what's most meaningful. Mostly everything is going to my mom and or his kids anyway. Really, there was no reason for me to expect him to have been stubborn or hard-hearted about any of this. It was just something that we needed to talk about. My father reiterated that everyone loves my daughter and that she'll always be family and always have a home. He has a gold bracelet that he has worn somewhat occasionally over the years, and he mentioned that my daughter thought it was pretty. When she was very little, she noticed it on his wrist and said that jewelry was for girls. He laughed and explained to her that sometimes boys wear jewelry too. She thought it was nice, and he let her try it on, even though it was way too big for her wrist. She was a little toddler then. I didn't know about that moment between them, and I thought it was really sweet that he remembered. He said that he was going to leave her the bracelet and a note, and that, as far as money goes, she'd get the same share as the rest of my kids. So we had a nice lunch, and we both felt better for it. Nothing too dramatic, but really this is the best way things could have gone. Thanks to everyone for confirming that I wasn't being crazy and that I needed to talk to my father and set things right. Comments Appropriatarius 1716. This is a happy update. Your father is a good man, and he raised you to be a wonderful man. Strategy 6765. Yeah. Glad to hear things worked out well with your dad. It sounds like he's got a good heart and made the right call. I wish you and your family all the best. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.